Hello and welcome to MIP TV and welcome to TA Theory with Bob Cook. In this series of videos, Bob is going to explain key elements of theory in transactional analysis. In the previous episode, Bob talked about the structural and functional models of TA, parent, adult, child. But in this episode, Bob's going to focus on scripts, life scripts, the things that we write from childhood. So why is scripts, Bob, such a fundamental part of TA?
Oh, it's absolutely fundamental, Rory. If we look at the pillars of transactional analysis, which you're going to do step by step, this is very early on. In his first book, Eric Byrne wrote, which is TA in Psychotherapy, he started to talk about the idea of scripts. So a definition of script taken from his book. It's an unconscious life plan. Now, in a later book, What Do You Say After You Say Hello, he talked about a script being an unconscious life plan devised early in childhood, which is played out later in life. Now, he never really gave like an age when people decide on their early unconscious life script, but we would say think of his writings 5, 6, 7. I mean, Freud talked about this in terms of making early decisions about life from an unconscious place. And I think he put about 5. So it's the idea that by 5 and 6 and 7, we have made unconsciously decisions about ourselves, other, and the world. And most importantly in transaction analysis, because transaction analysis is a developmental model, is that we make these decisions and they influence us for all our lives in relationships. So they influence our relationships and our expected patterns in relationships.
It's interesting, isn't it? I've just come across, I've just been thinking of a Shakespeare quote. All the world's a stage and all the men and women are merely players. They have their entrances and their exits, and one man in his time plays many parts. It's interesting, isn't it? Because the script is, as I understand it, is subconscious. In other words, we don't know we're doing it. I mean, are there any indications that you could tell by maybe something that someone's doing in the here and now, which would indicate what their life plan was, Bob?
Yeah, because Eric Byrne, of course, classified these scripts into winners' scripts and losers' scripts.
Ah.
Further on in the later book, he actually classified them and look in terms of Greek myths. So there'll be, like almost 1 script and almost 2 scripts, and he really classified them into Greek tragedies as well. So you got winner scripts and you got loser scripts. The ideas, of course, for a loser script would be that the person very early on is coming from an I'm not okay position. Therefore, self-esteem is impaired because they're actually inward and seeing themselves as not okay. So they pick relationships which don't succeed or have problems, and they sabotage themselves living out a healthy life, really.
Yeah. And that way they can always return to the theme of the script, which is things never go right for me, or it's always going wrong.
Yeah. So I saw a video you put down, I think quite a long time ago, many years ago, on somewhere, which traced the arc of the script. And I can't quite remember, but it was a small boy growing up.
Yes.
Lost. He had lost, and you were talking about how his hamster died, and then he made a decision about that, and then his brother died, and then he had a certain type of script which was carried forward. So he always expected people to leave him, and therefore was defended against that. And then there was an overcompensation, and then he was always living a life where he expected people to leave him, or some tragedy would have happened.
Yes.
So he wasn't able to hold down relationships because he was always afraid of them going.
Yeah, I mean, it links very strongly into attachment, doesn't it? Avoidant dismissive attachment, and things that I guess as therapists we see on a regular basis in scripts. I'm thinking of a man who comes to therapy who has trouble expressing his emotions, and the historical messages when he was a child was big boys don't cry.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So those are the early decisions, and we call them survival decisions or early script decisions that we make really for several reasons. One, to protect ourselves from hurt. Secondly, to the script becomes part of our personality, so it makes life predictable.
Mm-hmm.
And provides a structure for us and provides us the terms of reference on how we see the world.
Yes.
So if you're always expecting people to go, then you will defend against that. However, you will probably have how can I put this? A commitment phobic in a way.
Yes.
Because you would always expect, and some people, of course, go first. In other words, they leave a relationship first very quickly because they're afraid of the loss and people going.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. I remember when I was teaching scripts many years ago, I had a student who was very vocal, who said, I'm not buying this at all. I don't believe it. I think it's a load of hokum. And I said, do you think so? She said, no. She said, I live my own life, and nothing in the past affects it. And I said, what, when you were younger, what did your parents say to you a lot? And she said, I never did as I was told.
There we are.
And I said, and you're still not doing as you're told now? And she went, oh no. And she was like, and honestly, she sat in the class for a good 20 minutes, stunned at that. Stunned. It was.
Yeah. So that's a perfect example. So as a TA therapist, one of the first things you do with clients is do what is called a script analysis. In other words, in listening to their story, you help them become aware of the early decisions that they made about themselves, other people, and the world. And even further than that, you help them be aware of how they play out those relational patterns and frames and references in the world, so that they can take ownership of that process and change it.
You can get a new script on the road.
That's what Eric Burns said. He said, get a new script and life plan on the road, and that will enhance and transform your life.
Yeah. It's fascinating, isn't it? And just in everyday life, you can hear these scripts played out. I was stood in the shops and I heard someone say, "Nothing ever goes right for me. That's just how our family is." And the sense I had was that that's a script. It was developed very early in life, maybe because the family weren't doing so good, and that person carried it through the arc of their life.
And that means they don't end up doing things good. So it's like it's their relational pattern. It's what they expect, and they live the script out till they die. So this is fundamental for a therapist, a TA therapist, to help the person look at how the decisions they make really early on in terms of survival gets played out in relationships in life. And until they understand that or take awareness of that, they'll keep on repeating these patterns.
Yeah.
Games, and we're going to look at games later, but it's so important for TA therapists to get their heads around script analysis and how powerful that is. And a wonderful book. I know it's pretty old now, but I really recommend it because it's so easy to read. It's by one of Eric Burns' prodigal sons, or somebody who really Eric Burns was a mentor for, which was Claude Steiner.
Yes.
He wrote a fundamental book called Scripts People Live in 1974, which I suggest all students who are interested in TA and scripts read.
Yes.
It's very accessible, and he talks about winners and loser scripts and banal scripts, and most important, I think, what we call self-harm scripts or hermetic scripts, which we make a decision, that life is not okay, other people not okay, and then we live up to that.
Yeah, that we used to see. I used to see a lot of that when I worked with in drug and alcohol services, where people's stories would, would map that their self-confidence may be very poor, and they would live up to that, not sometimes very self-defeating, very, very difficult, So
it makes life predictable. You know where you are,
yes,
you know where the other person is,
yes,
and therefore you don't have to take risks to be different.
no.
Because everything is planned out.
And as famously has been said, and I can't remember who it was, Tony Robbins. There we go. If you always do what you've always done, you always get what you've always got.
That's 100% correct, and that's the job of a TA therapist, to help people become aware of that so they can change.
Yeah. So, Bob, thank you so much for explaining that fundamental part of TA, and I'm guessing right at the beginning of the therapeutic relationship.
The therapist helps the client, understand their script so they can change it.
Yes. So thanks, Bob. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you've got any comments, pop them in the comments bar below. Bob and myself are always happy to see comments. And in the next episode, we're going to be looking at the games people play.
Absolutely, which of course makes up the script.
Indeed. So until the next time, Bob Cook, thank you very much.
Thanks, Rory. Bye-bye.